My name is Kim Burton. I'm with the Mental Health Association of Maryland. I've been the director there for 20 years, talking to professionals and the public about all kinds of issues having to do with mental health and aging, a very important issue being that of caregiver stress. So I'm here to talk to you today about caregiver stress, COVID-19, and self-empowerment. This may seem obvious, but probably the most important organ of our body is our brain. And I love this little picture about the brain. That's about the general shape of the brain because it's working all the time. Whether we are aware of it or not, our brain governs everything that we do, our thoughts, our behaviors, our communication. It's always working, and it's always working hard. It's especially working hard when you're a caregiver. So we're going to talk a little bit about the brain, but we're also going to talk about quality of life. And I love this picture because the image lets us know that this person has a vibrant mind that's busy, it's colorful, there are lots of things that are going on, but the person seems calm. And that's fantastic to have a lot going on and to also feel a sense of calm and not feeling overwhelmed, which is a very common feeling when you're a caregiver. In our brain, we have lots of what we call neurons. Neurons are brain cells that must talk to each other. So on the far left of this picture here, you can see a picture of what a neuron looks like. And then in the middle, what I want you to notice is that these neurons communicate with each other. It's an electric communication. These neurons, as you can see on the far right, don't actually touch each other. They pass messages to each other. So those pink dots there resemble neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that are always shooting from one neuron to another, sending messages to help them know what to do. It is so incredibly complex. It's beautiful. We understand more and more about it as time goes on, but our understanding of how the brain works is relatively new. So there are a lot of myths and misunderstandings and misconceptions that we have about our brain and brain health. For example, in years past or decades past, we used to think that mental health problems were caused by things such as not having enough initiative, or being lazy, or not praying hard enough, or not well, we just thought about mental health as something that was within our control. And what we're going to talk about today will show us that we do have some control over our brain health. But just like other organs of our body, our brain can get sick regardless of how we treat ourselves and what we do to take care of our brain. So I really want you to understand that, like our heart, our kidney, our liver, our brains can get sick beyond our control. And it often has to do with damage to the brain, or this picture that we have here, which has to do with the communication of neurons. So I want you to think for a minute, how many neurons do you think are in your brain? Well, there's usually an average of 85 to 100 billion neurons in the human brain. So you're probably somewhere within that range. And that is an awful lot of cells that we depend upon to be working the right way. I like to think about what would happen if you put 85 to 100 billion cars into your town or into your city. You know that there would be some accidents. And that's how we need to start thinking about the brain, that there are times when we're going to have trouble with communication between all of these neurons that need to do what they do for us. So, stress. I want to talk about stress and neurons, stress and the brain. As human beings living in this world, we are under stress all the time. Stress just meaning that our brain is having to adapt to new situations and to tasks and to the kinds of things that we need our brain to do to help us get through every day. So everybody experiences stress. And we often think of stress as being a negative thing, but in fact, there is a positive stress called eustress. And positive stress can be things like having a party or the birth of a baby in the family or getting a new job or, any of those things that we get excited about that move us along. And that kind of stress energy called eustress can help us accomplish our goals and meet our deadlines. It keeps us mentally active and alert. It keeps us motivated. It really keeps us on task to do the best that we can do, and therefore it helps us with self-esteem. What is problematic is when we have stress that we call distress, which is, I think, the stress that we most often talk about, which are things that aren't necessarily wanted, or maybe if they are wanted, it's just a bit too much, and it keeps our body and our brain going. And that can be somewhat problematic. And so there's this phenomena you might be familiar with called the caregiver creep, which means that we are doing activities and things that we need to do to help another person. And in the beginning, it can be easy, but the work gets a little bit harder as as an illness progresses, or as we have to take more and more of our time to help with somebody else. So what can feel like easy eustress in the beginning can turn more into that distress. And I wanted to just have people be mindful of asking themselves questions about time, energy, strength, temperament, education, and finances. These are just some of the things that we should be thinking about when we're assessing whether or not we're in over our heads or if we need some more assistance, because we do have, as human beings, finite time, finite energy, finite strength. We have different temperaments. Some people are very, very good at being kindergarten teachers, and other people are really, really, really not made to be a kindergarten teacher. That has everything to do with patience. So we need to also think about those things as how comfortable we feel and the temperament that we have with a personality of somebody that we've known for a long time and lived with. Maybe that there's been conflict in a relationship, but now that relationship has changed and it requires you to be doing things that you may not have predicted that you would be doing. Do you have the mindset, the temperament, the ability to do that? Do you have the education to do that? Meaning, do you understand enough about the condition of another person? And do you have enough education about caregiving itself and education about you and how you respond to stress? These are all things that we need to be learning about in terms of ourselves and the other person and the circumstances. Stress can also creep in when our finances are being depleted. And as we know, we can have unexpected things come along that will make us feel financially insecure or make us wonder if we are going to lose any financial security. I want to pop back to the top three: time, energy, and strength. One thing that I've noticed in my journey is how many older adults are taking care of older adults. And in the beginning, when the care just requires some help with meals, that's fine. But as things progress, they might be tasked with doing things like helping somebody to get up out of bed or to sit down or to put clothing on. And that requires some physical energy. that we may not have as we're getting older. So we just need to be keeping track of these kinds of things, because without us really knowing, without us paying attention, the requirements can go beyond our resources. And when that happens, we can become distressed. And the ways that we might know that we are feeling stress are physical, mental, emotional, and behavioral. So I want to talk about some of the symptoms of extreme stress, not extreme, but when you are becoming overly stressed, here are some of the things that might be happening in your body. You might notice more muscle tension, fatigue, infections, or getting sick more easily, because when we're too stressed, our immunity is lower and we will catch colds and other kinds of things that germs can bring to us. So we're just more vulnerable to those kinds of things. We also, stress can make us feel pain, physical pain. So even though the stress might be in our brain, our body feels physical pain. Heart palpitations can happen, same with breathlessness, and weight changes. All right, so maybe weight loss or weight gain. And you'll notice as we talk about some of the other signs and symptoms of too much stress, that they are also physical in the body. So in our mind, what we might feel is overwhelmed or pessimistic, meaning feeling negative, feeling down all the time, feeling overly worried, having a hard time making decisions or thinking clearly. We might have more fears than usual. We might be more forgetful. We might feel angry or hopeless. A lot of times we will feel a loss of interest in things that we used to care about. And then there's rumination. And rumination means even though you don't want to be thinking about these pessimistic kinds of things, they keep coming back into your mind. So rumination just means it keeps coming up over and over and over again. Some of the feelings that we might have are anxiety or depression, feeling apathetic. That's a big word for meaning that you just don't care. Apathy is a lack of caring. People might feel angry. That's very common. They will feel angry, actually. But then they might feel guilty about the anger that they have. Feeling self-conscious, am I doing the right thing? Always questioning whether or not they're doing the right thing. Feeling negative about what they're doing. Feeling self-righteous. Feeling defensive. If other people make a comment, just feeling really angry, defensive, or, hey, I got this, I know exactly what I'm doing, leave me alone. All of these things can make us really irritable, obviously. And then behavior. So we see sleep problems, appetite changes. So see, this is where I'm tying to the body. So our physical manifestations have crossover with our behavioral manifestations of signs and symptoms of too much stress. Feeling tearful, being tearful, having conflict with other people. So when all of this is going on, it's really difficult to be able to be in that mind space where you can have really smooth relationships. Oftentimes we're feeling and acting ways that might be argumentative, or maybe we don't argue, maybe we just stop talking and wanting to be with people altogether, which is withdrawal. Cravings for sugar or alcohol are also very common. All right, so our body, when we have all of this going on with this stress, our body, our brain is trying to figure out what's going to make me feel better, what's going to make me feel better. And oftentimes we grab for those kinds of things that can change the way that we feel. So that can be sugar, that can be alcohol, that can also be something like shopping. Okay, so we get a little hit of dopamine when we go shopping, or when we acquire something that we like. Dopamine is one of those neurotransmitters that goes, the chemicals, one of those chemicals that goes in our brain from one cell to another to help us feel a little bit good, or a little bit better, I'm sorry. So these are things that we want to be mindful of. Think about these for a minute. Notice if these are things that you are experiencing differently. But also know that sometimes we may not be the ones with a good barometer on whether or not we've changed in these different areas. So it's important for us to depend on other people to help give us some feedback on whether or not they're seeing too much stress in our body. We might just be feeling blah. Maybe it's too hard to take those things apart. Maybe it's too difficult to parse out how the body and the mind and feelings and behavior. Maybe it's just feeling like this. You know, do you remember that picture where the brain was more vibrant? Maybe people just feel dull. This is kind of a feel of apathy here. So maybe it's a little too difficult to be able to assess all of those things I was just talking about. And maybe you just need to know that you feel differently. You don't feel like yourself. Things have changed. And it's time to pay attention to that. Because stress, the stress response in the human body makes all kinds of chemical reactions. One of these stress chemicals or stress hormones is called cortisol. And cortisol is really key to our overall health. Cortisol is fantastic in small, short bursts because it helps us do those things that we need to do. But over time, if we have too much cortisol in our bodies and in our brains, we risk certain conditions that are problematic. So as I had said before, we can have a suppressed immune system, which means that we can get sicker easier. And that's something that cortisol might contribute to. Cortisol can be very damaging to almost all of the organs of our body. Cortisol can contribute to cardiovascular disease, to obesity, to hypertension, to sleep problems, to depression, anxiety, and mood swings, and to brain fog. So brain fog is that experience of having a hard time thinking clearly, maybe having a hard time remembering. Sometimes people feel like maybe they have dementia because they just can't get their brain to work. And their brain might not be working very well simply because of the level of cortisol from the stress that they are experiencing. So what can we do about this? This is where, you know, if you've been listening, you might feel like, yeah, this is not a good story, because so many of the stressors that we are experiencing are things that we don't really have control over. Yet we are called to be there to work with an individual who might be experiencing perhaps a decline or an illness or some kind of need that they have that we are responding to. And it would be really great for us not to feel overly stressed by this, but the human condition is that we are constantly adapting to these demands, to these changes. So let's talk about empowerment, because this is where we're going to start focusing on what can we do. When there's a lot of stress, it can feel so overwhelming and paralyzing that we don't feel anything beyond hopelessness or just feeling overwhelmed. So we need to reset. And the way I'm talking about it now makes it seem easy, and I know that it's not. If you've gotten to the place where you feel overly distressed, where that cortisol has kicked in and you're not well, you're going to need help. You're going to need help. So this I got this isn't to say, hey, snap out of it, because it's a really hard thing we can't snap out of. But there are certain things that we can do. And I'm going to talk about education, resources, and self-advocacy. And before I start with education, I want to start with self-advocacy and say that being a self-advocate means asking for help. Being a self-advocate means treating yourself as you would treat your best friend. And if your best friend was suffering from some of the physical and mental and relationship outcomes of too much stress, you would jump in and say, hey, let me help. So one of the things that can happen when you're feeling overwhelmed is that you feel like you got this, you don't need the help of other people. But really, you do. So saying, I got this, means saying to other people, I need your help. All right, don't get confused about needing to go this road alone. During caregiving, probably the most important thing is having help, having people that can support you in this really, really difficult work. So let me tell you about a wonderful organization, the National Alliance for Caregiving. The next couple of slides that I have here are actually copied from their website. I found really exciting information about caregiving and caregiving as it pertains to COVID-19 or as it's impacted by COVID-19. So COVID-19, this pandemic has added a layer of stress to all of us. But for caregivers especially, we need to understand that there are certain circumstances that have arisen with COVID-19 that absolutely intensify some of the challenges that we have with COVID-19. So let's talk about some of those challenges. These are typical challenges that are exacerbated by COVID-19 that we need to have awareness about because it is elevating levels of stress for people who are caregivers. And that has a lot to do with the uncertainty of COVID-19, the impact that it has, that it will have long-term. It's easier for us to cope with stressors when we understand everything that they bring or when we know when they are going to end. But with COVID-19, more questions keep popping up. And so do some of the challenges, like limitations on visiting people because of their vulnerability to COVID-19. If you are a parent or you have children in your life, you understand that that's another impact because we're having families that are together more, kids having to learn at home, having to go to school at home. And that certainly is diverting a lot of time and attention from people who might otherwise be giving that time and attention to other caregiving duties. We have people who are losing work, maybe losing income, who are feeling less secure. And we talked about financial insecurity before as being a risk factor for caregiver stress. Maybe having difficulty finding access to medication or equipment, or just care providers, people to come in and to provide respite. So we need to, for sure, honor that these kinds of concerns probably always exist in the caregiving space, but are definitely exacerbated by COVID-19. So that can make us feel kind of powerless, which is why I want to talk about advocacy. Advocacy is a very empowering action that we can take. This slide, I'm realizing, looks pretty intimidating for somebody who's feeling overwhelmed by stress. But what this slide is telling us is that the National Alliance for Caregiving is working hard to use COVID-19 to bring attention to those areas of caregiving that are really critical to support caregivers. So these are different public policy areas or areas of advocacy where people are trying to make a difference on your behalf. I want you to know this because you're not alone. People are experiencing what you are experiencing, and there are national organizations, many of them, not just the National Alliance for Caregiving, but many organizations that are working on your behalf to change policies to make caregiving an easier journey for you. Something that you can do if you have the energy is to learn more about these advocacy initiatives, because it can feel really empowering for you to contribute, right? So if you are feeling that there are a lot of injustices as you're trying to be the best caregiver you can be, for example, with work issues and income issues and getting care, home-based care, these are struggles that you might be struggling with, feeling lonely and on your own. But you can lend your voice to the National Alliance for Caregiving and to other caregiving initiatives. So I want to let you know that in Maryland, we have a caregiving alliance. So we're going to have to black this out, but I'm just going to leave that for now. I also want to let you know that in Maryland, we have lots of caregiver support classes. Powerful Tools for Caregivers is an example of one of the courses that people can take to develop their own advocacy skills and learn as much as they can about becoming a caregiver who is well-informed, who is connected to other people. This is an initiative of the Maryland Department of Aging, and you can contact Maryland Access Point to find out about the caregiver support programs that exist in your community. There are also COVID-19 specific resources for caregivers. So again, this is a slide from the National Alliance for Caregiving website that talks about some of the resources specific to COVID-19. So I'm going to let you look at this slide for a minute and see how many different resources there are. And you will be able to go back and access this slide. Okay. Another organization that I thought was extremely helpful is the Caregiver Action Network. And I love the acronym CAN, Caregiver Action Network. If at any time you are feeling like you need some support, some education, some information on resources, you can call their caregiver help desk. This is cut and pasted from their website so that you can also see that they have a toolbox with, and not just one toolbox, they have several different tools that you can use as a caregiver. One of the things that I know we often are talking about are ways to reduce caregiver stress. And when I was doing research for this program and looking at the Caregiver Action Network, I noticed these strategies kept coming up over and over again. So I do want to just take a moment to hit on these caregiver stress strategies to help support you. Seeking support from other caregivers, knowing that you're not alone, which I've been emphasizing over and over again. Number two, taking care of your own health. It is so common for people who are caregivers to be paying attention only to the health of the person for whom they are caring and neglecting their own health. So that needs to be a priority. Accepting offers of help. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. learning how to communicate effectively with doctors, with any kind of health team. So the communication is not only with doctors, but with everybody who's involved with the health and the care of the person that you're caring for. Taking respite breaks, wouldn't that be lovely? So I know that we can feel so overwhelmed that it doesn't feel like there's any time in the day to take a break. But with the help of other people, that's something that you can learn to find. Unfortunately, there is not going to be a respite fairy that comes down with a magic wand that says, okay, here you go, take off, I'm taking over now. We have to unfortunately work to build these respite breaks in, but they are absolutely key. Watching out for signs of depression and also anxiety. So depression and anxiety are the two mental health problems that are most common that come from caregiving. All right, so the cortisol that we talked about earlier can actually contribute to depression and to anxiety. And knowing the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety are very important. Understand that there are new technologies that can help you care for your loved one, but also help you care for yourself. So one of the new technologies is the virtual support groups that people are finding right now. Take advantage of those virtual support groups so that you can be talking with other folks, because really you will get the best support from the people who've been there already. Then a detail here, making sure that medical information and legal documents are up to date and easy to find, because those are things that you will probably be called on to have to produce. And so when you just got them all together in one place, that's a fantastic thing. And you don't have to keep stressing over and over again about trying to figure this information out. And if you're not an organized person, I know I'm not an organized person, some of the tools that you can find in the toolbox at the Caregiver Action Network can help teach you how to do this. So you'll see up at the top in the right-hand corner, you can also email and live chat with people at the Caregiver Action Network. Their website is at the top, caregiveraction.org. Let's talk now about Team You. We're going to jump to how can you help yourself by inviting others to help you. My friend Lisa was going through a very difficult time in her marriage and was contemplating divorce. She actually did divorce, but what she did when she realized that she was just overwhelmed with all the feelings and the thoughts that were going on is she got a group of her friends together and she took them out to dinner, and she had them over for dinner, and she said, here's what's going on and I need you guys. Now, what was really interesting was several of these people didn't even know each other. Lisa picked people in her life that she knew would support her, and they were from different areas of her life. She brought them together. She brought them over for dinner. She told them what was going on. She was honest and courageous in saying, I'm going to need your help. And all of those people that came to dinner that night said, we are your team. We're Team Lisa. They actually stayed together, had gatherings together, probably 2 or 3 times a year for several years as Lisa went through her divorce. And she said it was the single most important thing that she did. And it made me wonder why all of us don't consider making a team for ourselves of those people that can be supportive when we're struggling. And it is a courageous thing to do. That's why we had the cape. It's time to put on your Superman cape. It's time to be your own best friend. It's time to get a whistle It's time to call some people together and say, hey guys, I'm doing some really hard work right now, and I'm going to need your help. So I have some ideas about the kinds of people that you can put on your team, because you do need a variety of personalities, a variety of strengths that can back you up. So when you're thinking about people in your life, think about that person who might be the librarian. What does that mean? The librarian is that person who loves to dig in, to understand, to look things up, to find resources. You know, you might be feeling a little too tired to be looking up all the resources, but you've got a friend there who's saying, hey, I want to help. How can I do it? So find that friend that really likes to dig in, that will get on the internet, that will look things up, that will talk to other people, that will find things out for you so that you don't have to be doing that. So on your team, you want a librarian. On your team, you also want an advocate. Who's the advocate? The advocate is that friend of yours that will stand up to anybody. The advocate is that person that you might want to take with you when you go to a doctor's office, so that they can be there to support you, but also to be asking some of the questions that you may not think about asking. They are there to ask in your best interest. So you might be feeling, overwhelmed by a certain situation. The friend who's the advocate is that friend that you can call to say, I'm not really sure the next thing that I should do, or I'm not really feeling the courage to have a conversation that I need to have. And the advocate is there to be your cheerleader. The other person you want to think about is the doer. The doer is that person in your life who loves to run errands, who's happy to stop by the grocery store, who's happy to take something to the post office, who's happy to go out and run around and do those kinds of things that feel really overwhelming, that will take time, that might not even be possible for you to do in those circumstances. There are always those people out there who are really eager to do tasks for you. So think about who that person might be. Next is the realist. We all need to have that person in our life who tells us the truth, who really brings us down to earth, grounds us, and says, you know, here's what I see. And they'll really lay it out for you. They'll tell you the honest truth. They'll keep you grounded. You might feel angry at this person sometimes, but you need them in your life to keep a check on all that's going on. So this person is the person who will tell you the truth and be very real and say, here are the circumstances. The next is the shoulder. What does that mean? The shoulder. The shoulder is the person to whom you can go to for solace, for comfort, the shoulder to cry upon. That person where you feel like you can share your emotions and be your authentic self, that person is going to listen and provide comfort. So we all have friends in our life that we can call and we can say, oh my gosh, this is what's going on with me. I'm just feeling horrible. But sometimes those people will say, well, you're feeling horrible. Let me tell you what's going on with me. And then what you get is a long litany of the kinds of things that are going on in their life, problems that are going on in their life. This is not the shoulder that we want to go to. The shoulder that we want to go to is the person who's just going to listen, who's going to listen non-judgmentally, who's going to understand, who's going to provide that warm, fuzzy feeling when we are feeling really lost and sometimes at our wits' end. And then, on the other hand, we need that person who's the comedian. So these struggles are hard, and sometimes they're funny. And sometimes we need that person in our life to lighten things up, to make us see the sunny side of things, to make us laugh, to bring a smile to our face, to let us know that even though we feel that we're in the depth of hopelessness, there is a ray of sunshine, somebody that can lift us up. These are just some ideas about the kinds of people that you would want to surround yourself with. But really, what I'm saying is you need to know that there are people out there who may not be your best buddies, who may not be people that you talk to all the time, but who do want to help. And you need to think about the people that are in your life that might fit into these different kinds of categories so that you can have a balanced team that can support you as you are going through the things that you're going to be going through. Some of the things that your team might help with are those regular quality of life things that we all need. So for our brain to be healthy and functioning well, we need to feel quality of life. What does that mean? What are some of the things that really bring quality to our lives? There's actually science behind some of these things. So we know that meaningful engagement, positive connection with others, positive coping strategies, freedom from threat and fear, and hope are all factors for our quality of life. These are things that we need to have that can very easily be depleted or go away when we become more and more involved with caregiving. These are things that other people can help us with. So just even having that team of people gives you people to engage with, gives you positive connection to other people. Positive coping strategies, I want to say a little bit about this because when we are not feeling well, we can grab onto coping strategies that don't serve us very well, just like I was talking about earlier with food, with alcohol, with shopping, or any of those things that we might use to make us feel better, but they're not really good coping strategies in the end. What we have learned is that resiliency is a skill that can be learned. So even if you have been a person who's not all that flexible, who has been rocked by the bumps that come along in your life, resiliency, flexibility are things that you can learn. All right, so positive coping strategies, but with a focus on being resilient, because you're going to be pulled in all different directions. Think of a rubber band and the utility of a rubber band and how it's twisted and pulled in all kinds of directions. And that's similar to you as a caregiver. You might be twisted and pulled in all kinds of directions, but you need to remain who you are. You need to keep that integrity and that essence of who you are. You need to be that rubber band that comes back to what it is after it's been stretched and pulled. Hope is so important. That bottom point there under quality of life. Hope is that feeling that even if we are in some pretty rough times, we know that these times are going to pass. And that's something that we all need to understand, that things are changing. And even with COVID-19, having that overlay of making things feel more difficult, or actually not feel, they are making things more difficult than they are. If we have hope, then we know that this too shall pass. Here are some strategies now for brain health. So we talked about the brain being a really important organ of the body. The brain needs to be nourished. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we need to do to nourish our brain. Our brain must have blood flow, oxygen, hydration, which means water, nutrition, and a balance of rest and stimulation. These are things that our brains must have to be able to work effectively. So when people talk about the value of exercise, that's blood flow and oxygen. When you're moving your body around, you're pumping blood through your brain and you're inhaling, getting that good oxygen that oxygenates your brain. So exercise is a wonderful, wonderful tool. It actually helps a lot of people with depression and anxiety. It helps people with energy and motivation. Hydration is super important, and our brains, our bodies are made up largely of water. And something that can easily happen when you're on the caregiver journey is that you're so busy, you don't feel that sense of thirst. You don't realize that your body needs water. It would be so wonderful to carry around a water bottle so that you know that you're getting enough water throughout the day. Because without that visual cue of having a water bottle, you may not feel the thirst and you may not be giving yourself enough water. When you don't have enough water in your body, you can feel sluggish, you can feel shaky, you can feel irritable. It can make you, that brain fog that we were talking about, where you just can't think clearly. All of these are things that can happen when you don't have enough water in your body. And a lot of times people feel sleepy and think that they need a nap, when in fact all they need is a nice drink of water. Nutrition is also important, and I can't say enough about all the vitamins and minerals and things that our brain needs that we get from the food that we eat. What we put in our body is what feeds our brain. Our brain needs those vitamins and nutrients and minerals. Our brain does not need the amount of sugar and salt and chemicals that we give it when we're eating junky food, when we're eating fried food, when we're eating potato chips, when we're eating donuts, all of those things that are easy to grab for when we're feeling stressed. Sometimes these are called comfort foods, but in reality, it's not comforting. It actually strains our brain. So if you like those foods, just have them after you have the nutritious foods. Talk to your healthcare provider about vitamins and supplements that might be necessary to help you to support your brain during this tough time. And then a balance of rest and stimulation. We need to get sleep. We absolutely need to have sleep, and we're learning more and more what happens to our brains when we're not getting proper sleep. Sleep disturbances are common, and as we get older or as we experience certain kinds of illnesses, our sleep can get disrupted. We might wake up more frequently during the night. We might have a hard time going to sleep. We might have a hard time getting back to sleep after we've woken up. We might have a hard time getting up in the morning. Sleep hygiene is kind of the fancy term for getting a good night's sleep. Unfortunately, I think what too many people do is they reach for sleep aids and sleep medications, those kinds of things that are advertised on television that can actually be dangerous. They can be addicting. They are only meant to be short acting. So there are more things that we should be trying before we try sleep medications to help with sleep, to help with sleep hygiene. There is a lot that you can find on the internet about things to do to help get more sleep. But interestingly, looking at your computer and your computer screen and your phone screen are one of the things that we've learned can be detrimental to sleep. So one of the most important things to do is to give yourself some rest from screens for a couple of hours before you want to go to bed at night. There are a lot of stressors in our lives right now that are keeping our brain a little bit too busy, so that getting rest and staying rested are really difficult. I urge you to look up sleep hygiene or different behaviors, things that you can do, like only using your bed to sleep in, not using it to read and to eat and to watch television in, getting some exercise during the day. lots of different things that we can do to improve sleep. So please try those before you try any kind of sleep medication. And then stimulation. So stimulation means our brains need to be thinking about things. Our brains aren't thinking, they're not working, they're not doing very much when they're sitting in front of the television. We need to be engaged in things that are challenging. So when we talk about brain health and look at those kinds of things that we can do to help protect against dementia, you hear about puzzles and games. Those are because that's challenging our brain, exercising our brain. We need to be challenged. Our brains need to be working like a muscle. If you think about your brain as a muscle, you want to keep that muscle moving to keep it strong. All right, so a rest and stimulation balance is what's needed. A lot of times, I want to say increasingly, people are turning to mindfulness and meditation, which is a way for us to be able to rest our brains during the day that is not a sleep activity, but more of a way to learn to calm the mind and to be in the present, which means not thinking about the past and not thinking about the future. And I wanted to bring this up because for a lot of caregivers, we are having to think about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And we have so many competing thoughts about what we need to be doing to take care of another person and ourselves, as well as to tend to other duties and relationships in our lives. The act of mindfulness and meditation is to block out those things and to just pay attention to what you're doing right there in the moment. So let's end with this. You've heard a lot of words. We've talked a lot about caregiver stress. We've talked about things that you can do to empower yourself. You might feel overwhelmed with all of the words that have just been thrown at you. But I want you to just close your eyes for a minute and feel the chair that you're sitting in. Feel your feet on the floor or your back against whatever it might be resting against. I know what I'm hearing in the background are my dog's paws clicking on the floor. Listen to those sounds that you can hear. Just be in the present. Take a very deep breath and open your eyes and welcome yourself to a better understanding of things that you can do to help yourself. And know that there are resources, some of which I talked about, the National Alliance for Caregiving, the Caregiver Action Network, the Maryland Commission on Caregiving, which is part of our Department of Human Services. Reach out to Maryland Access Point, which is part of your area agency on aging, and ask about their caregiver support programs. You can also find out about those caregiver support programs and the area agencies on aging by going to our website at the Mental Health Association of Maryland. Our website is www.mdaging.org, and it looks like this: Older Adults, Vibrant Minds. And you will find lots of resources that can connect you to local programs that are supportive of caregivers. We also offer this guidebook on mental health and aging, okay? Mental health in later life, a guidebook for older Marylanders and the people who care for them, is a pretty thick resource book. It's about 90 pages, but it talks about all kinds of aspects of mental health and aging, including caregiver stress, including those things that we need to do to take care of our brain. And it talks about the signs and symptoms that maybe a problem is developing, which is very important to know the signs and symptoms. But most importantly, it gives you so many resources about things that you can do for support, because there's a lot in your community that can help. All right, so this is what I'm offering to you today. I hope that it's been helpful. I hope that you feel empowered to think about those people that you can bring on to your team to support you. I hope you feel motivated to look at some of these resources so that you can become more educated. And I hope that you feel inspiration and energy to take those steps to become an advocate for yourself and to other caregivers, so that you might be able to write a letter to a legislator or somehow become involved in making things better for yourself as a caregiver, but for other caregivers around Maryland and around the world. Thank you for your journey. Thank you for the work that you do for everybody. And please don't hesitate to be in touch with us at the Mental Health Association of Maryland. Thank you.